Jenny. I have regularly seen and overheard conversations just like this one throughout my career as an admissions professional. First off, Northeastern and Drake are both private institutions, and private institutions do not cost discriminate based on in-state or out-of-state residency. So overall, they would probably be a similar cost, but more importantly, she could always transfer home line. I've heard that so much, but did you know transferring can have an early career economic impact of greater than $100,000? My name is Brian Nagin, and good morning. Appreciate you all being here today. I am the founder and CEO of Portico. And to get started, so what you're going to find is college has grown into one of the biggest investments a person will make in their lifetime. But unlike other large investments such as buying your first home or planning for retirement, there's still not a widely adopted support system that can help families navigate that process. Enter Portico. Portico is a digital platform to help students from the onset of their college search through decision day. And so it really kind of takes a student on that entire journey, starting as early as freshman, sophomore year in high school, through making a decision, sometimes days before graduation. So Portico is a series of learning modules that consist of videos, info bites, and interactive tools. A couple of the interactive tools I have right now are Portico Search and Portico ROI, and I'll be doing a demonstration on those here in just a little bit. As far as the customer archetype goes, not sure what's going on with the slides here, but what I found out through my experience in venture school, we really confirmed what I thought. And while students will be the main users, the customer is truly going to be the parent. They're the ones who would be supporting the student in their journey, paying for any services. And so I've decided to really focus on that 40 to 68 bracket. Been doing a lot of my social media marketing that I've started kind of in that 35 to 60 range and seeing some pretty good hits even from the younger parents. So, but really all across the US. And that's one of the areas I think I'm actually finding, as expected, the most interest from the coast. That's where independent educational consulting is most common right now. And so that's where there seems to be the biggest interest, at least through my digital marketing. As far as revenue goes, really focusing on two main revenue streams. The first one being subscriptions, the second one being services to kind of supplement subscription. But the subscriptions would get you access to all of the learning modules and interactive tools. And as I get started here, we're looking at about $10 a month, $100 a year. Once we get all of the learning modules up on board, we'll probably get to a final price point of maybe $20 a month to $200 a year. But in addition to the subscription costs, some families want additional assurance and support. And so I will have a series of workshops as well as individual consultations to help families navigate that search. And so some of those would be a family who goes through the search tool, has a larger list and wants help further whittling that down. And then you've also got consultations helping students with essays. I'm going to have a group college essay writing workshop, things along those lines. So looking at the market size, probably one of my biggest challenges is just the life cycle. So students are in this segment of their life for about 2 to 3 years. So you're not going to have a customer, other than potentially a parent with several children, but you're not going to have a customer for 10 years. And so there'll be a fair amount of churn. But overall, the market size is healthy. There's about 4 million students here in the US that are going on bachelor's degrees every year. And students will be heavily navigating this sophomore through senior year. So you're looking at an overall market size of about 12 million here in the US. Though I do feel like there's going to be a great opportunity for global expansion in the future as well. And this is where things get pretty exciting. Looking at the annual subscription revenue alone, if I could get 0.1% market penetration, I would be looking at revenues exceeding $1 million. And should this grow rapidly and expand heavily and it could get 5% market share up to, and this is with the 2024. So once I get up to the $200 a month, you'd be looking at, revenues all of a sudden exceeding, $100 million a year. So some really, really great opportunities there. As far as the competitive landscape goes, what you're going to find is Portico most closely mimics an independent educational consultant, which is what I was doing over the last year when I started to see just how much of a need there was for a more affordable option. And so it really helps to take that student from the beginning of their search through completion on that entire journey. But the other thing I found in customer discovery is students didn't necessarily want to meet with someone regularly, sit down in front of them, be a part of a specific schedule. They wanted to kind of navigate this on their own time. And so being able to have that digital component, have the learning modules was something that customers really seem to appreciate. So that's going to be a benefit. And then the price point is really going to be a fraction of what you would hire an independent educational consultant for. If you're looking for comprehensive services on the East and West Coast, the majority of packages range in the $10,000 to $25,000 plus range. So if you're looking at a couple $100 a year over 2 or 3 years, and maybe a few consultations here or there, you're still coming in at probably 10% of what the cost would be to hire a one-to-one consultant. All right, so now I'm going to take a minute to go through a couple of the tools that I built that students would use. And so I'm going to sit down here and show you Portico Search and Portico ROI. Yep, we're good. All right. So this is my search tool, and there are a lot of search tools out on the market. Several of them are free, but what you'll find is the majority of search tools out there focus on a filter basis. So basically, if you put in like, I want a small school in Iowa that has Division III football, you're going to get a list of 21 schools that are small schools in Iowa that have Division III football, and that's it. What Portico does is it basically has a scoring algorithm that gives partial credit. So if there's a school right across the border in Minnesota that could be a perfect fit, it's not going to just filter it out based on something that a student put in that they weren't quite sure about. And so a student has the ability to go in and weight how important things are to them, and also will match them academically based on their background. So I'm just going to use high school Brian as an example here and fill this out. So let's see, it wasn't a perfect student by any stretch, but did pretty well. So we'll do 3.9 GPA. It's from Iowa. And the reason that we put in-state versus out-of-state residency, if cost was important to you, it will factor in, whether or not you're looking at in-state or out-of-state tuition for public institutions. So that's why we asked that question. And then what was truly important to me? So I'm just going to go ahead and add a few things in. So I was looking at academic quality, wanted to play some golf in college. Well, wasn't that good, so it's going to be probably at the Division III level. Wanted to live on campus. Wanted to be in the city. But then there were other things that just weren't important to me. The endowment wasn't important. I didn't know what I wanted to major in, so that wasn't going to be a factor. The things that were most important was I wanted to stay a little bit closer to home. So that was going to be a huge factor for me. And then I'll just add in another one. The size is also very important. I was looking for a very interactive experience. I wanted a smaller school. And so I'll go ahead and put size. and then we'll search. And it will come up with a student's top 20 list. Let's see. Top 20 lists as far as safety, target, and aspirant. And so this will match you academically. And so a student who is a 2.9 GPA and a 21 ACT isn't going to have schools like Harvard and Yale and Princeton come up on their list. And conversely, a student who is a 4.0 and a 32 ACT isn't going to have schools that aren't going to challenge them come up on their list. And so it tries to match safety being schools that a student is definitely going to get into, but also would still provide a challenging quality academic experience for them. Target would be schools that the student profile kind of fits in the middle 50 percentile, and then aspirant would be schools that maybe we'd recommend continuing to work hard in college, taking your test score again. But there's also a little bit of an unknown going on right now in higher education with so many schools going test optional, and so that's something that you're seeing more and more what would have been considered strange decisions a few years ago. And so we want to make sure that those schools remain on a student's list as well. But overall, it allows you to kind of whittle down your list and then start your exploration process. So up here on the map, you can be like, oh, why did this California school pop up? You can see it's Claremont McKenna. There's a bunch of fast facts about it. And then you can actually visit their website right from there as well. So that's the search tool. It really kind of helps take a student from the not really exactly sure what I'm looking for, through this process. And so to supplement the search tool, I have a learning module where we actually go through all these parameters and kind of talk about 1-minute videos for each parameter, why this factor might be something that would be important to you or why it might not. But things like 4-year graduation rate, like why is that so important? Well, really, if you're looking at an extended graduation time of an extra year, not only are you paying an extra year of tuition, usually your scholarship only lasts 4 years, so you're paying more for that last year, and you're don't have the opportunity cost of working that additional year, and all of a sudden it's an additional $70,000 early career economic impact. And so we talk about why some of these factors might be important, so students can really start thinking about what's truly important to find that best fit. So that is my search tool, and then I'm going to go up here and switch over to my ROI tool. So I added a lot of these already. Not sure how the hover is working on this. Here, I'll just go back through to my PowerPoint. Okay. Just a second. Let me yeah, I just need to go back. I know. All right, perfect. Thank you. So I already added a bunch of these in. So Portico ROI will now help families kind of navigate the financial part and understanding what the investment looks like as a whole. So there's an option depending on where a student's at in the process. If they're at the stage of, I'm a senior, I've applied to 7 schools, I've gotten financial aid packages back, they can enter through the financial aid comparison, put in their financial packages to kind of look at an apples to apples comparison, and then go on to the expected return on investment, where it'll actually overwrite the medians to come up with a more accurate expected return on investment. However, if a student is like a junior and they haven't received financial offerings yet, we are going to use the median cost by income bracket data to say, okay, the expected cost for a person in this income bracket is going to be this much, and then use that to calculate the expected return. So I'll go ahead and go straight to that one and say we're very early in our search. And I brought up some of the schools that were on my list. I know this is probably small for you guys to see, but basically it comes up with that initial net cost. And this is something that I think really surprises a lot of families. So any guesses on what is the cheapest school a student from the lowest income bracket, 0 to 30,000 of income, can go in the country? Any guesses?
Probably something private.
The answer is Harvard. If a student is in the 0 to $30,000 income bracket, on average, a student going to Harvard is actually getting a stipend of about 5,000. So they're getting paid to go to Harvard, essentially. And so you see that quite a bit, though, and that's something that families just don't necessarily know. And so this is an example of families in the 75 to 110,000 income bracket, so far from the lowest. Pretty solid family incomes. But look at the expected initial net costs for a school like Notre Dame is 21,000. School, like Iowa and Iowa State would be, you're probably paying about full tuition and room and board, so that'd still be at the 16 or 17,000. But then you look at like an out-of-state school like University of Wisconsin, where you'd be paying out-of-state tuition, and they don't have as many grants and stuff, and they definitely don't have like scholarships that you see at a lot of the private institutions. The average is 44,000. So that the value for a student going out of state would be much better off going to some of these really great private institutions than an out-of-state public like Wisconsin. But then if you flip it and say, okay, my state of residence is Wisconsin rather than Iowa, and all of a sudden now Wisconsin goes from second to worst to third from the top, because now you're looking at cost of 22,000, and they already have great median earnings year 6, year 10. So that data is from the college scorecard. It's available out there, but basically looking at 6 years out of high school and 10 years out of high school, what are the different median earning points of different schools. My next step, I'm actually parsing the data right now, is to add major as a factor as well. So if you know what you want to major in, you can say, what's the expected ROI for an English major at these schools, and be able to look at it versus, a computer science major. Like I think, if somebody said, I'm looking at MIT, is it worth paying, $40,000 more for a computer science major? The answer is probably yes. Is it for an English major? People are probably going to say no. It'll be really interesting to see what the data shows. I think it's going to be closer than what people would expect. But we're going to be able to have that ability to really go to that level of depth to kind of look at these expected ROIs and see. So these are all pretty solid institutions. What's interesting is there's a lot of not so great institutions out there. And so I'll use an example of our newly departed Iowa Wesleyan. And we'll take a look at where that falls on something like this and the value they were creating. And so we're going to go here to, let's see, the highest income bracket, let's pick. And we're going to add Iowa Wesleyan to our list. And no surprise, it comes down and is far and away creating the least amount of value for a student. And the reason for that is this 5.07 expected completion time. So that number is created based on the retention and 4-year graduation rate at an institution. And so basically what's happening there is if students were transferring out at a wildly high rate. I think the retention was like 65%. So basically over a third of the students who came in a freshman class weren't even there by sophomore year. And the students that did stay were either transferring out later or not graduating. I think their 4-year graduation rate was 20%. And so, you're looking at, basically over 5 years, they're not providing a ton of aid. It's one of the cheaper options, but not wildly. But when you look at, going an extra year, not having good rates as far as median earnings go, having one less year of median earning, all of a sudden, the expected 10-year ROI is very, very low compared. And so that's something that you'll see kind of across the board. There's a lot of great institutions out there, but there's a lot that aren't up to par. And, it's really important for families to understand, what that investment looks like to try to make the best choices. And so what I would tell is a family is never make a final decision based on this. It's an expected ROI. There's a lot of factors that you don't know. But if you're comparing schools, it's important to look at this and say, wow, the expected ROI is $150,000 different at these schools. Maybe this is something I need to factor in. If it's like 5,000, you're not going to make your final decision based on that. It's going to be other factors, but it's important to understand that overall scope. And so that is kind of how that Portico ROI works. I'm not going to go into it, but if you want to add in a financial package, let's say a student got a full tuition scholarship at Luther, all of a sudden Luther, if their cost goes down to $10,000, that's going to add almost $100,000 in ROI, and they probably move up to second or third on this list. And so you can actually go in and plug in your offers once you have them and kind of see how that factors in the overall, expected ROI. So I'm going to hop back into the PowerPoint here. Where is that? Is it this?
Yeah, click there.
This one?
No.
Oh, right behind it, sorry. Perfect. All right, so this brings me to what I can use your guys' support on. So basically, I need to get word out. I need beta testers. Right now, I'm in a beta test process where I'm trying to get 150 beta testers to come in, try out the tools, try out the videos I have. And so if you know of anybody who has high school students, I'd love for you to pass on my information, have them check it out. If you yourself has high school students who want to check it out, that would be great. It's a free beta test right now. Social media support, I've got my QR codes here on the next page. Any support you can have there, whether that's likes or following me would be great as well. And then any strategic marketing ideas. So that has been what I've been working on most over the last month, is starting with the digital advertising, learning about that whole thing, which is a beast into itself, but it's been really interesting so far. Everything that I've seen has been mostly expected. The coasts are certainly been the most popular as far as families that are interested in this type of services. I think it's going to definitely benefit me to focus on that to start, get this a little bit more mainstream and then try to bring it to the Midwest. It's just not a concept that people are as familiar with here. So I'll do a lot of stuff in the local community, but most of my ad spend is probably going to be on the coast for that reason. Probably the biggest surprise overall is like my unique visitors have been a lot higher than expected. I've been getting, especially the last few days, like 75 to 100 unique visitors on the website every day. But the amount converting to the free beta trial that actually tests stuff out is tiny, like 1 or 2 a day. I'm seeing like 90% bounce rate from people that you get on the web page and then hop out without clicking around or joining and stuff like that. And so that's something that I'm gonna have to learn to navigate here over the next few weeks as well. But as we go into the question and answer, if you have any suggestions with things that your company have done in the early stages to get beta testers to gain traction, I'd love to hear any suggestions you have as well. So that kind of wraps things up. If you want to check out my website or follow any of my social media, feel free to hop on there with your phone and connect. But really appreciate your time today, and look forward to answering any questions you have.
Brian?
Yeah.
Obviously, I've heard your pitch, and this time around, part that kind of drew me was the educational consultant.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about, I'm sure everyone's journey starts with Google, or maybe the high school in some fashion. What are the triggers that are saying, I need a consultant, or I need that expert that?
That's a great question. So what I've found is it's so much of it is word of mouth. Oh, Johnny's daughter used this consultant. He was great. Like, you know, and he ended up going to this school. Like, maybe we need a consultant type of a thing. And so that's why I think I've gotten so much more traction on the coast, like even in the early stages, like this is a thing out there. Like it's very common to have an independent educational consultant. If you don't, a lot of times you want one or you at least know about it. Here in the Midwest, that's not necessarily the case. And so that word of mouth is probably a huge thing. You know, in the Midwest, you're gonna have, you know, more students just going on, you know, Google and saying college search or, you know, finding a college and things like that. And so I think, you know, playing in the digital platform, you know, learning my keywords and, you know, what's triggering is going to be wildly important, but there's just a lot less word of mouth here. And so when you see something, if you're not necessarily looking for it, like it's just not as familiar, like, oh, yeah, this is a replacement for an educational consultant that I can actually afford. Like, let me hop on it. Like that's gonna be a little bit harder here.
What I'm wondering is what the actual pain is. Is it insights it does? Is it confusion? Is it overwhelming? You know,
What is the pain for the families here? Yeah, so the pain point is interesting because like one of those things where families don't necessarily know that this is something they need here yet. And so they don't feel like they have a pain point, and so that's probably the biggest challenge. Their pain point is when they go to the wrong school and they end up, you know, significantly in debt and not being able to pay back their loans, and they transfer and all of that. Like that's where their pain point is. It's after the fact. And so what I need to figure out is how to, you know, get in front of families to say, this pain point is coming. Like, let me help you so you don't get there. And on the coast, I don't have to do that as much because they're familiar with it. And their pain point is like finding one that's affordable enough. Here, it is realizing that they need one. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So first of all, I was an English major that went to an A3 private school.
Me too. Me too.
Second of all, I spent a lot of time, I'm just trying to think of myself back in that time frame. I knew I wanted to get out of state from Arizona, but I went to like, they had a career center and like, I relied on the guidance counselors a lot. So is there like an effort to connect with high school guidance counselors? Is that, and is the our people still using them for that?
That's a really great question. So I've asked myself that a lot as I've gotten started. Like one of my thoughts when I was creating this is don't go directly to consumer, you know, have this be a product that you sell to the high schools. But what I found is kind of, there's really three components to it. First, high school guidance offices are resistant to independent educational consultants, maybe not so much the tools, but the consultants, because they feel like this is something that is their job and their jurisdiction. They should be providing the support to the students. But what I found through customer discovery is they don't have the time, capacity, or background to do it well. You know, with everything going on, you know, high school guidance counselors, you know, the size of the amount per school has not increased over the last, you know, 10 to 20 years. In fact, it's decreased a little bit. And yet, at the same time, look at everything that's happened in, you know, as far from, you know, mental health and the focus on that, and, you know, all of that stuff is taking additional time that now, you know, guidance offices are focusing effort there. And what was already kind of a secondary or third part of what they were doing is being pushed even further back. And so that's something that will be a challenge. The other thing I found is, you know, getting into high schools is really challenging, but what's even more interesting is the ones that I have talked to, they've got tools like this that are built into their bigger CRMs. So they have like a customer relation management database that, you know, students select classes through. It houses their transcripts and you know, it's just giant. You know, they can connect with parents through it and everything else. And they have like a college module. The ones I've seen, they're okay. They're not great. But for a school to say, "Ooh, I'm going to spend an extra, you know, $10,000 or $20,000 to buy this college module," when they already have one, has been a tough sell. Like the ones I've talked to are like, "Ooh, I do like that better, but we already have this and it's part of this greater system." And so then through customer discovery, talking with families, almost to a person, that was one of the questions I asked, what type of support are you getting through your high school? And the answer was none. And so they were really interested, like, we want to do this. And so I think what my strategy, or not I think, what my strategy is now is grow the brand. And then at that point, once this is more familiar, be able to say, hey, I've got this many student users, let's go back to the high schools. This is something that, students and families are already using, would you, want to use it like as an enterprise solution? And so I think I'm going to try to grow the brand through the consumer rather than the school, but it's certainly on my radar. I mean, there's an opportunity there. It's just, there's some barriers to entry.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things, I saw that, I don't know if you had it, I understand too, but, two, for example, students, can they take some tests? Or do you think that they could take some tests, for example, like emotional intelligence, so they can more precise identify, there's a type of I was student, for example, you were talking about grade point average.
Yeah.
Grade point average is a thing which is important, but it's not main thing. So,
Yeah.
it could be that one has a lower grade point average, maybe with that specific psychometric and I see be involved with more to apply to other universities.
That would be interesting. I mean, creating some sort of test where you could, measure personality traits and then, see where they're most successful and tie it back. So the structure I've built is basically the learning modules is more for the qualitative side of things, and the tools is more for the quantitative side of things. And so what I do in the learning modules is talk about some of those more qualitative things that if students would then assess on by themselves right now rather than through a test, but which we know isn't always accurate, but they would try to navigate those qualitative things on themselves, like what is truly important to me, or in conjunction with their parents. I think there's a space for that. It would be interesting. Like it's the psychology part of it is definitely not my forte. I probably have to, outsource that part. But I'm open to it. I think that it's an interesting dynamic for sure. We'll have to see where it goes. So right now, what I have would be in the learning module. Here are the parameters. This is why they're important. To make this assessment like yourself. I'm going to be building a major one on like trying to figure out your major and what would be the best fit there and kind of how to navigate that. And so all of that would be more like qualitative, video based. Like there'll be other admissions professionals that will be partaking in those and kind of helping families navigate that as well. But that will be much more qualitative at this point. If I could have a reliable quantitative tool, fantastic. But what I don't want to happen is to have a lot of qualitative stuff creep into the tools without data to back it up.
Another thing, for example, your presentation great, very compliment.
Thank you.
The other thing that I would add, like to see in the presentation also is an evaluation of the cost. For example, many families say, okay, this, they don't understand the importance of choosing correctly. Maybe how much does it cost? You're here, you maybe get, when your kid is 11 or 12 grade, or how much is it? It's going to cost 125 or so. I think it's good to write that because it could be attractive for
That's a great point. So in one of the learning modules I have right now, I've got a couple of slides talking about the cost of transferring and the cost of extended graduation times and all of that. To be able to include that in the pitch deck is probably worthwhile. But essentially, the math on just four-year graduation alone, as well as like retention. So a student who stays at their initial four-year institution on average graduates in 4.5 years. One who transfers at least once on average spends 5.5 years. So now you're essentially looking at an extra year of tuition, which depending on where you're transferring to, it could be anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 plus. And then you're not getting a scholarship beyond 4 years almost anywhere. Pretty much any scholarship you offer you get is for your first 4 years. So maybe if you were spending $20,000 a year, maybe all of a sudden that last extra year now is 35,000 or 40,000, and you're like, oh, well, I gotta finish, I'm here, but now you're paying even more than what you expected. And then the last part of that is the opportunity cost, with basically starting salaries in that 40 to 60 range, let's just say $50,000, and it's pretty close to $100,000. It's kind of the cost of transfer on average. And there's certainly stories out there of a student who transferred into a better place and, worked really hard to make sure credits transferred and graduated on time. And, it's not going to be any more, but, the data is out there and on average, I mean, it is going to be probably in that $75,000 to $120,000 range on average is going to be what it costs, depending on if you're transferring to a public institution, private costs, all of that. Yeah.
And one last thing, if I see this, all that, if there's schools, get involved last years, probably if you ever thought to participate in school, I'm saying this, because I'm there. Also, very interesting. It's not, the expert that goes in, it's all new, that's something that, they can.
Yeah. I have it on my radar now that I've got more concrete stuff to reach back out to schools. So when I was in venture school, I reached out to probably 25 local schools. I think I heard back from one. Like it just was, there was not much support from that standpoint. Now that I have something more concrete, and perhaps I could send it, follow up with a call, then you get a chance to look at this, that type of thing to try to get in there a little bit more often or get in there a little bit easier. But it's been a struggle getting to the schools and access to the schools. But yeah, I think having a parent night with this information, like I would happily go do free college planning info sessions on just kind of here's a timeline, here's some things to look at, and that would be a great source of business. Like people would be like, oh, well, I want access to your tools, and it would be awesome for the family. I think this would be great for the schools, but getting the schools to buy in has been a challenge. Yeah.
You take into consideration things like going to Kirkwood for 2 years and then transferring to Iowa. That's a little, you're kind of down on transferring, but that's probably a little different than going to Iowa and transferring to Iowa.
It would be a much better option than that. So I would like to add something like that at some point. It's interesting. I mean, it's certainly very popular in people's minds right now. Go to a 2-year community college and then transfer to a 4-year. I think the math doesn't work out quite as favorably as people think, because they're just assuming I'm going 2 years, then I'm going somewhere else 2 years, and I'm done. When the reality is, what percentage of students going to Kirkwood end up going to a bachelor's? Is it that we're planning? There's certainly people that are just going for the 2-year degree, but is it 60%? Is it 40%? Is it 80%? That's a little bit hard to say that because you don't know what's in people's mind. Like, are they going for a technical degree? Or are they going just to knock out prerequisites? So the quantitative side of that is a little bit difficult, but you're certainly going to have some students that are just not taking that next step. But then what percentage of students are transferring are then finishing their next stage in 2 years, or will it be 3 years almost across the board? It's hard to say. I mean, having your associate's degree helps, but even then, in a lot of places, you're looking at probably another 3 years. And so if you can find a place where you can graduate in 4 years and you get some good scholarships versus going 2 years and then going 3 years, and maybe your scholarships are lower. It's not necessarily a bad option, it's better than going to Iowa Wesleyan, let's say, but it's not as obvious of a decision as a lot of people, maybe think in their minds, like, oh, yeah, my kid's just gonna go 2 years, knock out prerequisites, it's gonna be really cheap, and then they're gonna transfer, and that's the best option. That's where, I would really encourage a family to look into it deeper, maybe do a consultation where we can actually sit down, break down the numbers and take a deeper dive. But yes, I think adding something like that in would be beneficial. It's interesting, but I would say that there's a lot of people that are on that train. Is this the best way to go? Higher ed's gotten so expensive, but being on the admission side, like when I was at Co, freshman scholarships were typically, between, well, at that point, it was probably 50 to 70% of tuition. Transfer scholarships were more like 10 to 35%. So if you want to go to Kirkwood and then transfer to a private school, let's say Co, all of a sudden now maybe you're taking an extra year at Co, so you're taking 3 years anyway, versus 4 if you come freshman year, and you're paying, an extra 20% a year for those 3 years than you would be if you went there as a freshman, and you're now not working that extra year. It doesn't necessarily work out in its favor for that. Now, if they're transferring to Iowa and there's a decent chance they're going to be here 4.5, 5 years anyway, and now they're going to be here 4.5, 5, and they knock some credits out, might be a reasonable option. So I think what I encourage families to do that are looking at that is make a complete plan. And if that complete plan makes sense for you, that's a great option. But don't just do it as I'm gonna do 2 years and then figure it out. Make a complete plan, know what you want, and then go forward. And in some cases, it's gonna be beneficial, in others, it's not.
Another thing, you said you take all, students, smart, not so smart, rich, not so rich. But it seems like the middle class is at the most disadvantaged. If you don't have any money, there's money available for you to go to school. If you're rich, you can either pay for it, or if you have a smart student, you're gonna get a scholarship whether you're rich or not.
Couldn't agree anymore. I mean, that's a big reason why I've done this. So a family that makes $80,000 a year, let's say, spending, I was way cheaper than on the coast, but spending $3,000 for something that none of their friends or relatives have done and didn't know that they needed, like, they're not gonna do that. I mean, that's a lot of money for that family. But at the same time, it's most critical for them to get this advice and get, have somebody to talk to and have somebody to, look at ROIs to figure it out, because it's hard, because they're getting squeezed, because they're not quite getting, grant money and loan money, or they're getting some loans, but they're not getting a whole lot of grants. But at the same time, is it realistic for a family making $8,000 a year to be spending $20,000 a year on college when they have 2 other kids in high school? No, probably not. Like, so what do you do? Like, how do you find that right fit? And they need support. And here in the Midwest, they're not willing to pay $3,000 for that support. But if I'm spending $50 to $100 with that family, like, that's actually a really low price point. And so that's why I decided to create, let's find a more affordable solution that, rather than just people at the highest income who, don't need to support as much, are the only ones that are working with private consultants in the Midwest. How can we expand that? And so that's kind of the route that I went with the platform.
Just a comment here. Cornell's go through all sorts of strategic planning and so forth. Number one issue on campus right now is student mental health and reducing the burnout because of the transfer and dropout rates. I couldn't believe how prevalent the issue that is for not just that, but schools.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like, you wonder, is mental health changed that much in 15 years, or is it just an awareness thing? Like, it's probably a little bit of a combination of both. I mean, with COVID and everything else, I mean, these students are coming in less prepared. Like, I think there's a balance. Like, I don't think you could say it's one or the other, but I mean, retention and, transfers and all that, like, that's always been an issue. And now they talk about mental health, 10 years ago, was it, we're recruiting the wrong students? 20 years ago, it was, do we have the academic support team in place? Like, so it's like, this has been talked about with colleges and strategic planning for years on years on years, but it feels like it goes in phases on what they're attributing it to. And it's interesting, like, it's a combination of all of those. Like, Co is struggling with the same type of stuff, like their retention rate over the last, I mean, since I used to work there, like, we're pretty consistently like 83, 84% retention, which is pretty solid for a small private institution. And I mean, they've been pushing 76 to 79 the last 5 to 8 years, but they've changed admission strategies. They brought in a lot more students. They're profiling down a little bit. So is it the mental health, or is it they're just bringing in more students who probably aren't, ready and wouldn't necessarily be the fit that would be ideal if you weren't trying to bring in that many students? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it, but yeah, it's really, really interesting. But certainly the mental health is probably the main focus right now that schools are attributing it to. But like, in the 20 years I've been in this business, I've probably seen 3 or 4 different cycles. We're talking about the same things, we're just attributing the reasons for it. It is changing and sticking with it.
One more question.
Yeah.
There's a great story now, right? And it's so potential. I have 2 questions after. The one is on the technical part, and second for the stable government. So this is a machine learning problem, or just for students?
It's what machine?
We use machine learning for this?
No, so basically it's more or less just analytics. So Tableau is kind of the base. And so I have scraped all the data and then basically built algorithms through Tableau. And so it's more like basically algorithms through flat files that I'm using. I think there's potential for machine learning. I think there's potential for AI with this. I need to get it to a point where I can get investments to be able to make that happen. I've kind of brought it as far as I can, just with my background in analytics and coding and stuff. But I think that there is a massive opportunity to kind of build a machine learning model or even an AI model. So I'm talking with somebody right now who's building an AI essay support for writing your college essay, where rather than, like, you could basically go to ChatGPT and have them create a college essay for you. There's actually this video out there right now of a person in 1.5 minutes generating an AI essay and then running it through an AI detection service that shows it's 97% likely that it's AI written. Running it through a different tool that makes it so it doesn't look like it's AI generated, running it back through that detection that shows down 3%. I mean, it's wild. So people are going to get around it, but what I would love is to create like an essay support tool where rather than just rewriting your essay for you, it would like provide feedback, like a consultant would to say, rearrange these paragraphs, that type of thing. And so I think there's lots of opportunity to add in some more technical elements. But it looks like he's ready to go. I can answer your next question. I'll come over right when we're done here.
Within this I was still on possibility here. So how many parameters will fit one side of the right now?
Do we need to go? I can just
No,
come over.
quickly, if you can.
Okay. So what was it?
How many different ones? All parameters maybe like now.
Yeah, so right now I've got 16 parameters in my search tool, but the amount of data I use to come up with those 16 parameters is like, think like 150 fields wide. So I'm combining a lot of data points through my algorithms that then come up with those 16 parameters. So, and then there's about 2,500 four-year bachelor's degrees. So basically, at 2,500 by 100, so you're looking at about 250,000 data points.
The demographic question, I was just thinking about myself coming to here, like, if nothing much student, and if I had this school, I would drop completely. So when you said a lot of people are like adapting and using it in the post, thinking it must be found to like Indian, Chinese, descent that actually take care of an investment in education. So I'm wondering if you considered looking at international admissions or organizations of the do this. Yeah, recruiting and admitting international.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. Like that, I think that there's a fantastic opportunity for global expansion. I just need to get it a little bit further and kind of get it, you know, a little bit closer to complete, I think, before I get it out there. But I have a friend who's like a counselor at international high school, and he was in China, but now he's in Singapore. That, and we've kind of talked about that opportunity and looking at, you know, global expansion. But I don't know, 100% on my radar. I think it's got an opportunity there. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
We have one traditional final question. What can we maybe do to help you?
The word out, any beta testers. So yeah, if you know of any high school students or families, you know, pass on my information. I've got cards here I can hand out. My link's right here, but help me get the word out and get testers, and that will help me move forward.
Sounds great. Brian, another hand.
Thank you.